What's going on? What's going on? What's going on, y'all? Hope everyone is doing well on this Monday. I was going to wait until tomorrow to do this read through, but again, I'm following the flow of spirit, okay, to just share information with other people to help establish more of community, to be able to do my part in giving back to humanity. And I hope that through these read throughs, you are able to receive something that is for you, okay? So before we get in, I think this might be kind of quick because we're only reading 4 chapters today, which I think is, or section, shall I say, which, excuse me, is going to be pretty easy because, baby, it's hot and I ain't trying to be up here doing this read through sweating to death, okay? So with that being said, we have to work smarter and not harder, okay? Boom, a copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips to balance in favor of fair use. And with that being said, we are going to continue with part 4. Heal yourself, okay? Awaken to the healer within. And we're starting off with something known as the frog story. It is true that if you place a frog into a pan of hot water, it will jump out almost before it hits the water. However, if you place the same frog into a pan of cold water and very slowly raise the temperature, it will never think to jump until it's too late. The human life form is much the same. It has been demonstrated many times. Over the years, we accumulate layers of distorted energy patterns through our judgments and fears. Then one day, we discover disease and disharmony in our emotional or physical body and wonder where it came from. Many never jump until it is too late. The lessons I have been taught. What's going on, Queen Spicy? Shout out to you. Shout out to you. Life is a lesson. Life is a series of lessons. It is for these lessons that we have come here on earth. The lessons? To experience our feelings and emotions, and so it has been with me. Each year, each day, each moment brings another experience. But in the last 4 months of my daughter's life that I refer to in this writing, my daughter Lisa, she is 25 years old. It was early October when Lisa asked if she might move in with me until she could find employment and get on her feet financially. She had never been employed since early August. She had not been employed since early August. Unknown to me, she had not been feeling well, but thought that things would improve soon. During that time, I had been traveling extensively for my company, and I was only home for a day or so before going out for another week or two. Upon returning home from a trip in early November, I noticed that Lisa's skin and eyes were quite yellow. I realized that she had jaundice, a condition resulting from a liver dysfunction where toxins were backing up in her system. She made an appointment to see a doctor, and after an examination and blood test, it was suspected that she had hepatitis. The test results came back the following Monday. She was told that a doctor had been alerted to receive her immediately at the hospital's emergency room. She was admitted and the test began. During her examination, they found a ruptured tumor in the uterus that was bleeding uncontrollably, so blood transfusions were immediately begun. Suspecting cancer, they would need biopsies to confirm it. Thus, numerous tests were ordered, including a CAT scan, x-rays, and I think it's called a laparoscopy. A laparoscopy, you're gonna give me that word again, involves an incision near the navel where a tube is inserted that permits blowing the patient up with carbon dioxide gas, much like a balloon. Then a second tube is inserted that has optics to probe the abdominal area. In Lisa's case, they decided to make 3 additional incisions across the abdomen for a more intensive exploration. A total of 4 incisions in a patient who was already bleeding uncontrollably. Over the next few days, they would take 9 biopsies, each causing another area of bleeding that also required healing. The tests confirmed that the liver and kidney were enlarged. The swelling had caused enough pressure to close off the ducts, or passageways, preventing the liver from draining the toxins. They inserted a shunt, a small tube, via the mouth down the body and into the area of blockage. This procedure successfully opened the passageway and allowed the toxins to drain. She improved quite noticeably in 2 or 3 days, and her condition continued to improve. The kidneys, however, started to fail and continued to deteriorate over the following weeks. Thank you, Spicy. You basically said it right. Thank you. I appreciate that. Because some of these words be like, Lord. The real concern at this time was the suspected cancer. We awaited the lab reports, which took several days to arrive. In the meantime, the team of doctors were becoming frustrated as the bleeding continued. A total of 16 pints of blood were administered in 9 days. In spite of extreme pressure from the doctors, Lisa steadfastly refused chemotherapy, for which I commended her. The doctors did not know of any way to stop the bleeding and hoped the chemotherapy would shrink the tumors, allowing the bleeding to stop. Biopsies confirmed their suspicion that lymphoma tumors and tissue had compromised the liver, kidneys, pancreas, stomach, uterus, and ovaries. There was extensive, metastasis. Lord, Andrew Caldwell. Ooh, Lord, never leave you, nor forsake you, throughout the abdomen area. The doctor assured us that the medical journal showed a 50% cure rate using the recommended chemotherapy for this type of cancer. We were later told separately by other doctors on staff that there was variously a 60, a 70, a 65, and a 95% cure rate, also quoted from the same medical journals. We asked for this in writing, but they would not comply with our request. They would soon find that they were quite knowledgeable in the area of cancer. Lisa was informed that she had an advanced case and they would need to use a big hammer or heavy chemotherapy, which would cause her to lose her hair and probably become sterile. What the doctors did not know is that I too have studied the medical journals, which indicate there is possibly a 50% chance of remission if the cancer is confined to a single location. However, when the cancer had metastasized in 2 or more areas, there's little that modern medicine can do. In fact, medical studies have shown that those people not receiving chemotherapy and radiation actually lived longer than those who did. Lisa was well aware of the toxic side effects of chemotherapy. Dr. Samuel Epstein from the University of Illinois College of Medicine, testifying before the 100th Congress of the United States in his report on cancer, stated, apart from the immediate toxicity, such treatment as chemotherapy and radiation, while effective, can increase the subsequent risk of developing a secondary cancer by up to 100 times. Of most concern at this time was the uncontrollable bleeding from the uterus. On the evening of the 9th day, I asked the doctor in charge of the case what method would be the most effective in controlling the bleeding. He answered, tying off 2 arteries that feed the uterus. I asked why he had not done this. He replied, because the vaginal wall is compromised with malignant tissue. At that time, I received a psychic message. Perhaps you can't, but we can. Most people today understand what visualization is. With your eyes closed, you visualize what you want to achieve. Many professional athletes do this while sitting in a chair before the game. Golfers may see themselves practicing their golf swing, seeing and feeling every motion throughout the swing, making each move in perfection, sinking putt after putt. If you visualize yourself getting well, your disease healing, the bleeding stopping, this is in reality spiritual healing, since only energy is being used, and energy is spiritual, not physical by our definition. Yes, even professional athletes work with spiritual energy, and most likely you have too. Incidentally, positive thinking is also spiritual. If you visualize yourself getting well, this is called visualization. However, if I visualize Lisa getting well with her permission, then it is called etheric healing, psychic healing, spiritual healing, laying on of hands. Call it what you will, it is all the same thing. As soon as the doctors left the room, I turned to Lisa and asked, "Is it your desire to have the bleeding stop?" "Oh yes," she replied. "Then with your permission, may I assist you?" She responded, "Yes, but please don't touch me. I'm in a great deal of pain from all the surgery." "That will not be necessary," I replied. I then held my hands a few inches above her lower abdomen, closed my eyes, and visualized my fingers sliding under the artery, pulling a waxed cord around the artery and firmly tying it tight. I repeated the same thing on the second artery. I visualized the bleeding coming to a trickle and then stopping. At this time, the bleeding stopped, and there was no more bleeding from this location in the remaining weeks. The next morning, I asked the oncologist, "How is the bleeding?" He looked at the nurse who was present and asked her the same question. She replied, "We haven't had to use any more pads since last night, pads to absorb the blood." I looked at Lisa and winked. She smiled and winked back. In the hallway, I met the doctor in charge of the case and again asked about the bleeding. He stated, "I never look at what's coming out, blood, but rather what's going in, and there have been no more transfusions since last night." Lisa has always been spiritually aware. She knew as well as I that neither the doctor nor I can heal anyone, and that in fact, patients heal themselves. The doctor or the facilitator can only provide the tools for patients to use in healing themselves. Healing cannot occur without the patient's permission at some level of consciousness. Lisa's faith had proven this to be correct. It was at this time that I received a psychic message. Lisa will be healed, and in a time not too distant, she will be able to take care of herself. On the 12th day, the doctor said to Lisa, "Since the bleeding has stabilized and the liver has been draining well, and since you refuse to accept our recommendation for chemotherapy, you may as well check yourself out and pursue whatever treatment you choose. However, the kidneys are not functioning well and will only get worse." Lisa signed herself out and went home. The hospital stay had not been a pleasant one for Lisa. When she entered the hospital, she felt a bit punk as a result of the toxins that was in her system, and of course, she was a bit concerned. During her stay, she had received very poor nutrition. The first few days were full of medical tests that require her to abstain from food and, in some cases, liquids. For long periods, she had no food other than IV fluids. On the morning of the 5th day in the hospital, Lisa told me she had not had anything to eat for some time. They'd scheduled a CAT scan that morning, and she was to get breakfast afterwards. Later, they informed her that they were running behind schedule and that the scan would not be until that night, so she couldn't have anything to eat until the next day. When I returned that afternoon, I found they had given her barium from an upper and lower GI test they planned the next morning, which meant she would not be receiving any food until even later. I called the nurse in and said, "Well, nurse, I've been around the medical profession long enough to be qualified to make this statement. It's unfortunate that sometimes doctors get so wrapped up in medical technology that they forget the needs of the patient. This young lady is badly in need of rest and nutrition, and she had had neither since she had been here. Are you going to give her dinner tonight?" "I don't know," she replied. "I will do what the doctor tells me to do." She returned a few minutes later with a tray of food. With all the tests that were taking place, it is understandable that Lisa was kept busy with doctors and nurses running in and out of her room, poking her, even when she was sleeping at night, taking blood samples, and other endless medical activities. This continued every few minutes, day and night. With the added stress of fasting, she was completely exhausted. It was difficult, if not impossible, to sleep in the daytime, as there was construction on the floor below. The loud noise of jackhammers could not only be heard, but the vibrations could be felt through the floor all the way up her bed frame. Her spirits had remained high and her attitude positive, but at this point, she broke down and cried. I held her hand and said, "Lisa, you are in charge." She replied, "I don't feel that I'm in charge." I said, "People can steal your power only if you allow them to." The next time the doctor and nurse came barging into the room unannounced, Lisa stated in no uncertain terms that this was her room and she demanded her privacy. Her door was to remain closed, and anyone who wished to come in could knock. If she felt up to it, she would ask them in. If she was asleep and did not respond, they were to stay out and come back later. This would apply not only to them, but to her mother, father, brother, and friends. Lisa took her power back and never gave it up again. I was proud of her. We respected her wishes, and we knocked first. When she left the hospital, she was unable to sit up or roll over by herself due to the 4 incisions and 9 biopsies, which caused her considerable discomfort. This was also complicated by the severe abdominal pain resulting from the carbon dioxide still in her abdomen. If you ever had stomach cramps due to trapped gas, multiply this many times and you can appreciate the problem. Nurses tell me that if doctors ever had a laparoscopy, they would never prescribe one again. Furthermore, Lisa was severely chafed between her legs due to the continual wet pads. As if this were not enough, she had retained more than 25 pounds of water, mostly from her waist down, as a result of the fluids given through her IVs. Her legs and ankles were swollen to the point that the skin looked like it would burst. This left her unable to walk without assistance, and then only with great difficulty. There was a further complication that they never warned you about. Having a number of friends in the health field, we had been told to be alert for side effects caused by blood transfusions or from blood transfusions. I asked, "What effects?" And they answered, "Tell me who the blood donors were. Did the blood come from a male, a female, a night watchman, a pregnant woman, a drug addict?" Lisa no longer has any of her own blood and is now compromised with any problems the donors had. One of those effects will most likely be itching until she starts making a blood supply of her own. Lisa's itching was intense and became worse toward the early morning hours when she wanted to literally tear the flesh off her legs. In a few days, working with massage therapy, acupuncture, spiritual healing, and simple techniques, we were successful in removing the 25 pounds of water she had gained from the IVs. The stomach pains were all but gone, as well as pain from the 13 surgical incisions, and she was able to get up and move around under her own power. The daily improvement was encouraging. 2 days before Thanksgiving, Lisa threw up a large volume of blood along with fibrous material from the tumor that had caused the stomach blockage and made it difficult for her to hold food down. We saw this as a positive sign that the body was eliminating something that did not belong there. The following night, Thanksgiving Eve, Lisa again threw up a large amount of blood, but this time she arose to go to the bathroom, became faint, and momentarily went into shock. I immediately called 911, and shortly thereafter, she was readmitted into emergency at the hospital. Blood transfusions were ordered. Her stomach was flushed out and a scope inserted in effect to find what caused the bleeding. We were informed that there were 2 or more sites near where the stomach meets the small intestine that were seeping blood, and since it was a lymphoma site, they could not cauterize it. Again, there was nothing they could do but continue transfusions. I said to myself, "You can't, but we can." Immediately, the word fusion entered my thoughts, and I knew that was what I had to do. As soon as the doctor left, I turned to Lisa. "Is it your desire to have this bleeding stopped?" I asked. "Yes," she responded. "May I assist you?" Again, her response was affirmative. I closed my eyes, held my hands above the area involved, and visualized light beaming like a laser onto the affected site. In my mind's eye, I saw a scab forming over the area and the bleeding stop. They would give her 2 pints of blood, but there was no further loss of blood following the healing. 48 hours after her admission, she was again released to go home. Again, we worked at removing several pounds of water that she retained after only 2 days in the hospital. Things went fairly well for several weeks. Her spirits were always high and her attitude was positive. Being very sensitive to energy, she could sense those persons with positive or negative attitudes. Those who were positive were welcomed. Those with negative thoughts were not. She had enough to contend with without having to support someone else in their problems. Lisa's kidneys had continued to deteriorate and examinations indicated kidney failure. Dialysis was scheduled. Once again, Lisa's condition deteriorated. Her blood pressure had dropped dramatically, and for the 3rd time, I called 911. She was stabilized with fluids, was made quite comfortable, and had several good days. Thursday, January 30th, she sat up in a recliner most of the day and ate well. When I arrived after work, I asked Lisa, "What would you like to do?" Lisa said, "I want to talk to you." "Well, that's fine," I said. "What would you like to talk about?" She made herself comfortable and looked at me. "Dad, I realize that if I am to continue my life, I must assume certain responsibilities, and I don't know if I can handle that." Well, I responded, "Lisa, not only can you do it, you will be great at it." She looked at me with piercing eyes and said with conviction, "Dad, don't lecture me. Listen to me." Her words rang in my ears. She was trying to tell me something, and I was not listening. I am very much aware that a good communicator is first and most importantly a good listener. I had not been a good communicator. She was desperately trying to tell me something of major importance that was happening in her life. something that would determine whether she would remain here or go on to other things. I listened. After all, it made little difference what I wanted for Lisa, or the doctors, or anyone else for that matter, but what Lisa wanted for Lisa. We had a nice visit that evening, and she was quite content. At 11 p.m., she threw up a large quantity of fluid, largely blood, and the nurse read her blood pressure at 50/30. Several attendants immediately began to take her, bed and all, to intensive care. Lisa insisted on getting into a wheelchair, but they assured her that at this time she might become dizzy and pass out. They called for 2 more units of blood and injected a drug intended to stabilize the blood pressure. I was called to the phone just outside her room, where I had a clear view of what was going on inside. I counted 11 doctors, nurses, and attendants trying everything they knew to keep Lisa alive. Her situation was critical. It was 11:30 p.m. and the doctors was talking to me on the phone. "Mr. Work, what do I do if Lisa stops breathing in 15 minutes? For the first time, I felt the urgency of the situation. I replied, "I want you to do what is necessary to keep her alive." The psychic message that had come to me was always ringing in my ears. Lisa will be healed, and in a time not too distant, she will be able to take care of herself. I had never visualized Lisa other than getting well. The doctor continued, "Mr. Work, your daughter is terminal. It would be a terrible thing to put her on life support systems, forcing her to breathe. We are giving her medication intended to stabilize her blood pressure. In a critical case, we give 20 units. Mr. Work, we are giving Lisa 75 units and she is still not responding. What do you want me to do?" I stated, "You may consider her terminal, but we believe in a higher source." "I understand," he said, "but medicine is limited in what it can do." I replied, "Continue to support her as you have, with blood, oxygen, IV fluids, and any medication for pain. Should she stop breathing, make one honest attempt at CPR. If she does not respond, then nothing else should be done." I returned to Lisa's bedside. It would be another hour before they received the blood they had asked for. She had a transparent oxygen mask on. I placed my hands on her hand and shoulder and began my healing powers. With my eyes closed, I could see a fog. I said silently, "Lisa, let me help you across the threshold." I could see the fog starting to part, and then suddenly I realized I was looking at her soul. I exclaimed aloud, "My God, I'm looking at your soul." Lisa had been drifting between dimensions, and I was aware that she had been talking aloud to her spiritual guides and angels, laughing and carrying on in a lively conversation. I thought I heard her saying, rather garbled behind the oxygen mask, "Talk to me, talk to me, talk to me." I thought she was talking to her guides, but suddenly I realized she might be talking to me. I responded, "Lisa, I love you," and began saying my healing prayers aloud. Immediately, she relaxed and breathed peacefully. Since the time she had entered the room, her eyes had been closed. Within the hour, before they received the blood for her, she was sitting up in bed, quite relaxed, comfortable, totally aware, her blood pressure normal. She looked at me, and at the best of her ability, tried to explain what had happened. She held her hands up to one side and said, "Dad, over here I could see everything that has happened in my life, and I knew why I am the way I am." Then moving her hands to the other side, she said, "Then I could see everything very clearly, and I knew what I had to do to change everything." Looking directly at me with an angelic look on her face and speaking with wisdom coming from her soul, she said, "Dad, everything is going to be all right." I mentioned that she had been saying, "Talk to me, talk to me." She laughed. "Yes, I remember that. I kept asking you to talk to me, and when no one answered, I thought I was dead." We laughed. I pulled a reclining chair next to her bed. The nurse gave me a blanket. I placed my hand in Lisa's, and I remained with her throughout the night, and every night from then on. Her blood pressure was normal and other vital signs were stable. When she was admitted to intensive care, they inserted a tube through the nostril and into the stomach so that it could continually drain fluids and blood into a clear container mounted on the wall above her head. Previously, internal bleeding would make its way into the stomach, and after enough had collected, it would cause her to feel nauseous and finally throw it up, leaving her drained of energy. The tube would prevent this and conserve her energy. Saturday, she received dialysis, and I returned to find that she had been given another 3 units of blood. This made a total of 33. That day, a friend and I were in the room with Lisa, one on each side of the bed. She gave a smile of satisfaction and said, "I'm so happy the two of you are here." We acknowledged that we felt the same, and each of us took one of her hands between ours and held them for nearly an hour. I could feel the energy flow through us to her and from her to us. She would look from one, then to the other. Much of the time, she was looking over our heads and around our bodies. She had the strangest look, one of awe, and we knew that she was looking at our auras. Each passing day, she was drifting more and more between dimensions, between physical and spiritual awareness. Lisa was very peaceful. It was a beautiful experience. At one point, Lisa looked intently at her fingers. After a time, she said, "Dad, I could see it, energy, coming out here," pointing at her fingertips, "going in here," pointing at another fingertip, then looking directly at me with an angelic look about her. She said, "Everything is going to be fine." On Sunday, Lisa's friends dropped in one by one. She was delighted and quite alert the entire time. After they left, I returned to be with Lisa. It was 8 p.m. On Sunday, Lisa's friends dropped. I read it again. I noticed that her blood pressure was dropping. She was picking at the tape on her nose for the past 3 days and held the stomach tube in place. It was annoying and causing her a great deal of discomfort. By 10 p.m., Lisa was drifting between dimensions. She was in a state of consciousness where she could be talking to me and then be in another world communicating telepathically or speaking out loud with her spiritual guides. Suddenly, she grasped the tube coming from her nose with both hands and began to pull it out. I grabbed her hands and shouted, "Lisa, stop that!" Immediately, 2 nurses came running in and grabbed one hand and I the other. The 3 of us could not stop her as she screamed, "Take it out! Take it out!" She had already removed it about 6 inches. I looked at the nurse and said, "Nurse, please take the tube out." Lisa had not been passing any blood from the stomach for some time. Again, I repeated, "Please take the tube out. It's okay. We can always put it in later if we feel it's necessary." The nurse then withdrew the tube, and Lisa looked at the nurse calmly and in a soft voice simply said, "Thank you." She had reclaimed her power. She was in charge. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was preparing for a greater journey, and she didn't want to go with a tube sticking out of her nose. She was noticeably more comfortable and at peace. A few minutes later, she looked up and to the right side of her bed. I had been standing to the left the entire time. As she looked up, Her mouth dropped open in awe. Looking back and forth across the section to the right of her bed, with an expression of total amazement on her face, she said, Where did you all come from?" She looked and listened intently. Then, after a brief pause, a look of pure ecstasy came over her as she exclaimed excitedly, "Yes! Oh yes! Oh yes! Yes!" I knew that her guides had just asked her if she was ready to go home. Only moments afterwards, she turned to me with excitement still in her voice and said, "Dad, you don't know, do you? You just don't know." I answered, "Lisa, there are many things I don't know. Would you tell me about it?" She thought for a moment, then replied, "Dad, I don't know how." Then tenderly said, "I love you." A few minutes later, she sat forward in bed, looking to her left toward the foot of the bed. Her face lit up with an expression of pure delight, as if she had just witnessed a great magical act, and said excitedly, "Wow, that's pretty fucking good." Whatever she had seen had brought her pure joy. I was very much aware that her eyes had changed this evening. I mean, they had physically changed. The entire eye was larger. Not only the pupil, but the entire colored area of the eye. Looking into her pupils was like looking into a bottomless pit. I had read of this occurring to those who were about to cross over into spirit, but this was the first time I had personally experienced it. I recognized that this physical change in the eyes permit us to see in a different dimension. She had spent much of the evening looking around my head at my aura. It was evident that as the minutes wore on, she was moving closer and closer to her true spiritual form. Her pulse rate had been racing at 150 per minute ever since I had come into the room, and her breathing was labored, much like an asthmatic who struggles to take in a deep breath. But now, it was becoming more noticeable. Only a few minutes since her last delightful statement, she turned to look me directly in the eye and said very seriously, "Dad, if I can answer the question, why won't you let me die?" I replied, "Lisa, I am not holding you back." "Is that your desire?" "Yes," she answered. "I want to die. I want to die." Her statement was not one of a person who had a death wish as we knew it or know it, but rather of one who realized that if she were to go on in her spiritual journey, that is the doorway that one goes through. I added, "Lisa, I love and honor you. I am here only to help you through your journey, whatever or wherever that may take you." I leaned over her, gave her a gentle hug, and whispered in her ear, "I love you." She whispered back, "I love you too, Daddy." Her breath was quite heavy for a few seconds as she looked deeply into my eyes. Her pulse rate on the monitor began to slow to 120 beats. She closed her eyes and her breathing eased. Then she took 2 long and relaxed breaths as if she were falling asleep. It was 11 p.m. and she was gone. I pressed the call button and the nurse responded immediately. I suspect she had been watching her monitor at the desk. I said, "Nurse, CPR, now." She entered the room quickly as other attendants responded to the call. The nurse suggested that I would be more comfortable in the waiting room and they would come and get me as soon as they had something to report. I complied. A few minutes later, the nurse, accompanied by the lady physician, came into the waiting room. With an expression of serious concern for my own welfare, the doctor said, "Mr. Work, I'm sorry, but Lisa did not respond to the CPR." I reached out and placed my hand on her shoulder and replied in a gentle voice, "It's all right, doctor. It's all right. This is where Lisa's soul wants to be at this time, excuse me." I returned to the room and stood beside Lisa and held her hand. As I looked down at her, I said, "Lisa, where did I go wrong in my interpretation of the message I received? Lisa will be healed, and in a time not too distant, she will be able to take care of herself." No sooner had I asked the question than the answer hit me with its full impact. I had been looking through my physical eyes, not my spiritual ones. This was her healing, and she was now able to take care of herself. How well I knew that for some, death, as we know it, is the healing. I had been hearing what I wanted to hear. I had been looking at life in a materialistic form, not seeing life as it really is, in the grand concept of the great divine plan of which we are all a part. Life as we know and think of it is the illusion in which we are participating for the moment. Our spiritual nature is the reality. Lisa was very much aware of that reality as her time came near. This is what she was trying to tell me when she said, "Dad, you don't know, do you? You just don't know." Yes, I did know. But in the effort to see life as I wanted it to be, I had forgotten. Wow. Spicy said they should have brought her back the first time. Yeah, no shade. As a parent, you raise your children to the best of your ability, acting as their guardian, protector, and teacher. You share hardships, anger, frustrations, as well as those happy times, memories that will last forever, and yes, love. But in the end, it was Lisa who would become my teacher. With lessons of faith, courage, patience, compassion, and love. Faith. This we shared from the beginning of her adventure. Faith that the healing we had asked for we would indeed receive. There were many healings along the way. Healings within Lisa, healings within the family, healings with her loved ones and friends. Courage. Her spirits always remained high. Her positive attitude was unshakable. Never once did I hear her complain. Compassion. Everything that had happened in our lives in previous years seemed to melt away with the reality of the moment. I no longer saw my little girl, but a young lady faced with tough decisions. A young lady who needed my help more than the little girl ever did. She was dependent on someone almost 24 hours a day to buy food, to cook, to massage her swollen legs and feet and the back that hurt from too much lying in bed, to take her to the doctors, to dialysis, and yes, at times even to the bathroom. Patience. Patience is a most understood word. Patience has not to do with holding one's temper inside. Patience is true knowledge of and true faith and trust in the unfolding of divine order. Patience is the affirmation of the blessing while you are waiting for it to manifest. Patience is faith that the divine law of love will unfold everything, manifest everything, provide everything. Patience is faith. Learning that what we have sought in love, according to the laws, will be ours, and is manifest as the cycle of all unfolds. Learn to use your patience in the faith and knowledge that what you require will be given. Love. Oh yes, love. How can I ever describe the feeling that had grown between us during these 4 months? A new respect, a new understanding, a new love for one another. Love, a state of being without judgment, a love unconditional. Love without judgment. To respect and support her decisions, decisions that only she can make. Decisions that are right for her as she sees them, not as we want her to see them. According to her needs, not ours. This was her journey. No one could live it for her, and she would not permit anyone to do so. Decisions not to take chemotherapy or radiation, despite the tremendous pressure by medical authorities and well-wishing friends. She knew her body better than they did. She knew that, by their diagnosis, she was already terminal. She knew and trusted her feelings that she would receive her healing, if not in body, surely in spirit. After all, the healing you ask for is always received at some level, and where better than the soul. Lisa knew that death is the natural progression in the continuation of life. Lisa allowed me to share her experience through her thoughts, her feelings, through her eyes. She allowed me to see beyond our mortal world into the eternal world of our nature, our eternal spirit. No, not something that is waiting for us in some obscure place, but rather our spiritual being that is ever present in us. A soul is not something you have. It is what you are. That night, in her presence, I could feel her energy and that of her spiritual guides. By sharing her journey with me, it was she who became the teacher and I, the student. Yes, the lessons I have been taught. Everyone admired Lisa's long, full, beautiful hair. And she, in her determination, had said, if I am going to go, I am going to go with my hair, okay? And she did. Let us picture in our minds a beautiful blue lagoon on a clear day. A fine sailing ship spreads her brilliant white canvas in a fresh morning breeze and sails out to the open sea. We watch her grow smaller and smaller as she nears the horizon. Finally, where the sea and the sky meet, she slips silently from sight, and someone near you says, "There, she is gone." Well, gone where? Gone from sight, that is all. She is still as large in mass and hull, still just as able to bear her load. We can be sure that just as we're saying, "There she is gone," another is saying, "There she comes." Life is eternal and love is immortal. And death is only a horizon, and a horizon is nothing save the limit of our sight. As one door closes, another opens. While we are mourning the loss of a friend or loved one, others are rejoicing to meet them again beyond the veil. And that's from an author unknown. When someone is born, we are not sad. So why would we be sad because one has graduated and gone back? We experience sadness because the human experience includes emotions. Some feel sadness when their children leave for their first day of kindergarten, when they leave home, when a daughter gets married. Some experience sadness when a loved one leaves to go on a trip that might take them away from some time. I would suggest that we exchange that sadness for joy. Joy for the new and exciting experience our loved ones are moving into. They have completed one experience, one more chapter of their journey. It is graduation day. Find joy in your heart for the joy they will receive as they move into their new spiritual experience. Spicy says, a lot of times it's the family that keeps a patient alive and doesn't realize how much suffering the patient's enduring. They're not ready to let the person go. Exactly. That's why I try my best to really love myself and to understand that, because there are some realities that I'm going to have to deal with. I'm going to have to deal with the reality of losing my mom, my dad. Hell, there might be a possibility that they may have to deal with losing me or my sister, or you know what I'm saying? Like, just choosing to look at things in a different way. They don't realize they're doing more harm than good. Even CPR is hard on patients' frail body. Cracked ribs or sternum can occur. Yeah, because you got to push down pretty hard. Exactly. So with that being said, y'all, we're going to take a quick break, and then we have 2 more sections to read, which I think are not going to be that long. And hope that you all are enjoying the live. Please make sure you hit the like button. Okay, please comment if you choose, and also share and subscribe. And if you feel compelled, hit that Cash App at the bottom. Okay, $ BubzDaGawd. We take all Cash Apps, okay? All donations, all right? And we will be back in a few. y'all. Excuse me. Oh, I needed that water break. Oh, baby. I needed that water break. Thank you. Okay, let's continue with part 4 of Awaken to the Healer Within with reversing the aging process. This is going to be interesting. More articles are appearing whose topic is reversing the aging process. Is it possible to stop the aging process, let alone reverse it? The answer is yes, okay? It is definitely possible. Some people are even doing it, and many more will soon follow. As with most things in life, the process is not as difficult as you might think, but it does require a commitment. Old age is a disease of the mind. It is time to eliminate this disease, okay? Before it is possible to reverse the aging process, you must first change your belief system. Our whole life has been one of reinforcing an age-old belief system that we get older, not younger, that the body deteriorates, not regenerates. We reinforce it continually with the most powerful energy in the universe, our thoughts. Both my father and grandfather lived till age 70. I guess I have 10 more years to go. The mind is the first thing to go. I can't remember what the second is. I guess this is what you expect when you get to be my age. When I retire, I am just going to sit back and do nothing. No one in my family ever lived past 67. This must be what it's like to get old. I just feel worse every day. One person's favorite saying was, "Nothing improves with age." For him, nothing ever did. Have you ever noticed how the conversation changes as you move through life? When you are young, you talk about girls, boys. After you get married, the subject changes to children. Later it becomes grandchildren. About that time, for many, their thoughts are preoccupied with comparing their illnesses and operations. Well, I had triple bypass heart surgery. Oh, that's nothing. I've had a 5-way bypass, a gallbladder, and a tumor removed. It is the one thing that they have in common, and it becomes the focal point of many conversations. They associate disease with getting old. They do not realize that it is a sign of blocked energy, and that it is the blocked energy that leads to the deterioration. You attract to you that on which you focus, the universal law of magnetic attraction. The process of regeneration. First, surrender to the complete healing within. Release all energies that would create and or support stress in your life. Second, eliminate thoughts that reinforce old belief systems. Third, create new thought patterns that will reinforce that which you desire. There are 100 trillion cells inside of you, anxiously waiting for you to tell them what to do. Dear God, each day I do indeed become younger and more alive, in mind, body, and spirit than the day before. Thank you, God. Fourth, the thymus gland is one of the major glands within your body. It might be said that the thymus gland is the gateway to your immune system. Medical science understands that a child has a large thymus gland, and that as you grow older, the thymus shrinks in size. Now, Anne Marie and I have a different theory. We believe that you grow older because the thymus gland is deteriorating. If you could stop the degeneration, you would stop the aging process. So if you reverse the process and begin to regenerate the thymus gland, you will reverse the aging process. Dr. C. Samuel West, in his book, The Golden 7+1 writes, a statement written in a letter by Elijah, that's a long ass last name, I'm gonna say Blue. Elijah Blue, okay? She had worked with cell cultures for many years as part of her cancer research. She has worked at Boston Medical School, Tufts Medical School, and Southern Medical School, conducting research in biophysics, cell biology, and biochemistry. She says, any medical researcher who has worked with tissue cultures knows that cells can be kept alive indefinitely, but you must keep the chemical balance in and around the cells and eliminate the waste products of metabolism. Excuse me. She believes cells are meant to be eternal. They should not die or degenerate if the environment is kept clean, nutritious, and chemically balanced. Reversing the aging process is not simply a matter of eating the right foods. Good nourishment can assist in maintaining a good level of energy for the physical body. How well that food is digested and utilized by the body is directly related to how well the emotional body is balanced. If you are experiencing emotional stress, anger, depression, or fear, then even eating the best foods cannot prevent poisoning the body. These emotions can result in diarrhea, constipation, vomiting, indigestion, and heartburn. Regeneration must be accomplished at all levels of the being, which includes the mind, body, and soul. The healing removes the buildup of distorted energy patterns relating to thoughts, judgments, fears, etc. After the slate has been cleaned, two powerful tools to aid the regeneration and rejuvenation of the body are the harmonic vibrational essences and soul breathing, both discussed later in this book. And now to our final section of part 4. I choose to be in a safe place at all times. Understanding that you can now manifest your own reality through the desires of your thoughts, there are many interesting options that you may wish to consider. Anne Marie and I choose to be in a safe place at all times. For this to manifest into a reality, you must truly believe that what you have asked for, you have received. Your belief system becomes your reality. This has been demonstrated to us on many occasions. Allow me to share a few. It was during the morning rush hour traffic that I was driving with my mother towards San Francisco. As we approached the Golden Gate Bridge, there was a tunnel we had passed through. Automobiles were bumper to bumper and traveling at high speeds. We were traveling in a fast lane with cars on both sides. Just before entering the tunnel, immediately ahead of us, several cars began to spin out, crashing into each other and into the walls of the tunnel of one solid mass extending from one side of the tunnel to the other. There was nowhere to go except into the wall of cars immediately ahead. Mother gasped as she tried to react, putting her hands onto the dashboard to brace herself. There was no time to apply the brakes, nor did it even enter my thoughts, I only knew that I was safe and that no harm would befall us. In that instant, the cars directly ahead opened as if it were parting the waters of the Red Sea, Rather than hitting the brakes, I pressed the accelerator to the floor and sped through the opening and beyond the reeling mass of automobiles in the tunnel. In the rearview mirror, I saw the vehicles close immediately behind us, once again crashing into each other. Mother's hands had hardly touched the dashboard when she exclaimed, "What happened? It all happened so fast." I smiled and replied, "It's okay, Mom. We're safe." While traveling to do our workshops in a motorhome, Anna Marie and I parked the vehicle next to the home of an acquaintance, which was surrounded with mature pine trees. We pulled in just as a storm broke loose with 70-mile-per-hour winds and driving rain. There wasn't much for us to do except wait out the storm, and we were thankful that we were secure in the motorhome. Suddenly, we heard the loud and long sound of a tree breaking and falling. We held our breath, anticipating its fall. The tree hit the motorhome with such an impact that the vehicle bounced completely off the ground, almost throwing us out of our seats. We sat there in the dark, considering what to do next. Finally, after determining that there was no water leakage through the roof, I said, "I have no intentions of going out in the storm. I will wait until morning to survey the damage." After the storm had passed and the sun was shining, I cautiously opened the door to assess the damage. The 50-foot tree had hit the ridge of the roof near the side door with such force the tree had broken into 3 separate parts. 2 were lying on either side of the door and had bounced in such a manner that neither had touched the motorhome. I climbed the ladder to see what damage had been done to the antenna and other equipment mounted on the top, and found to my surprise that the tree split upon impact and top third of the tree had completely catapulted up and over the vehicle without touching its roof. The only damage was a 3-inch crack in the paint on the surface where the tree had hit. Even then, it had not broken through the fiberglass. Anne Marie, riding with a friend, was attending a meeting for the day. That evening, one of the participants left the meeting and noticed that the rear tire on Anne Marie's friend's car was flat, but being in a hurry, did not take the time to return and advise them. Later, they drove the 30 miles home unaware of the problem. The next morning, Anne Marie's friend received a phone call from a person who had noticed a flat tire asking if they had arrived home safely, considering the tire problem. Surprised, she responded, "What tire problem?" She rushed out to find that the tire was indeed flat, but no damage was apparent, nor did it appear to have been driven in that condition. And ladies and gentlemen, and everybody in between, we have just finished part 4 of Awaken to the Healer Within. I am grateful for this book. I am grateful for the stories. I am grateful for the affirmations. I am grateful for the exercises. And I am grateful that there are people in the world who see it for you and don't even know you personally, but they don't have to know you personally. And for people to look at you through what is known as Christ consciousness, which is older than religion, okay? The consciousness of knowing that I am connected to the divine source, and that on all spectrums of my life, even all the way up to death, I am still loved, I am still covered, I am still whole, I am still complete. Even in the midst of chaos, adversity, trials, tribulations, when the storms of life are raging completely out of control, that you have the ultimate power to enact the peace that passes all understanding within yourself. And I'm telling y'all, that is something that can be done. Now, is it difficult sometimes? Of course. I'm learning how to do that now. To find peace, even though the situations outside of me might be triggering. And knowing that even the triggering situations only serve as a catapult or a step or a conduit into something greater. But I'm learning to find my power. And again, it took me almost being damn near 32 years old to be aware of my power. And now I'm learning to apply it in my life. And not just me, we all are. So I hope that this read through helps you. I hope that it inspires you. I hope that your life becomes better from it. And if it does, which I'm sure it will, if it does, please make sure to pay it forward for other people. That's how we make a change in love, starting with us and then sharing that energy with others. Okay? So again, thank y'all for rocking with me for part 4 of Awaken to the Healer Within. Make sure you hit that like button, okay, to help this channel get up in the algorithms. You can comment, you can share if you want to. Okay, hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell and click all so you won't be late or delayed to my uploads, because baby, I go live at random times. You got to follow the flow. And if you're feeling compelled to donate, okay, to the fantastic voyage known as BubzDaGawd, okay, to our church building fund, you can hit that Cash App, which is scrolling at the bottom of the screen, $BubzDaGawd. Any amount helps, okay? We're receiving all blessings in all intersections, okay? Shout out to Queen Amber and shout out to Queen Spicy, who are in the building. Shout out to those in the bushes. Shout out to those in the replay gang. And until next time, everybody, enjoy the rest of y'all Memorial Day. Peace.